And it's the hour of empower, 7 days a week, every day of the week. Today's word is access. Start thinking, if you haven't already, of what your definition of access is. We'd love to hear it. We depend on comments to drive our interactions and to stay more relevant and really give you some wonderful, beneficial takeaways that you can justify for the time, thought, and energy you share with us. So, with that, before chat takes over, I'll introduce back Leslie, and then I'm so happy to have Melissa Cohen with us today. No relative, but you never know. And with that, Leslie, why don't you share a little quick update, a little bit of what's your thoughts on access, and then we'll just follow the conversation based on comments.
Great. Hello, everyone. Um, I'm just going to get right into it with access. So before yesterday afternoon, I my immediate thought about access was about like in the workplace where people want to be seen and heard, and how to create more access, whether it be to meetings, whether it be to other people in the company, uh, just much more in the inclusion kind of definition. However, something happened to me yesterday afternoon that made me think about access as access to our information, and how accessible are we, and how to be unaccessible. Because it turns out, uh, luckily, I caught it at literally as it was happening to me, where I'll just get into it really quick. An Apple phone was purchased with a credit card of mine. And then I got what they call spam bombed. I don't know if anyone's experienced that. You get 1,000 spam emails like in 5 minutes. And it's all because they're hoping you missed the Apple confirmation where you purchased a phone. It's a real purchase. It's just that they're going to go pick it up and I'm not going to pick it up. Well,
Hmm.
I saw the Apple phone thing and then the spam bomb came. So I was lucky I caught it. Apple canceled it. Right now, they're probably catching the person who's arriving at the store to pick up this phone. So I feel like I'm helping others because there's one person off the street that is doing this. But I started, of course, your mind starts going before I figured it out and before Apple helped me. I was like, how accessible are we? Like, immediately, I wanted to shut down my LinkedIn. I wanted to shut down my YouTube. I want to shut down everything because I'm like, you know what? My information is out there and they're figuring it out. And I don't, this one turns out to be much more of just a credit card scam, not from getting me through the entity that manages my credit card. I believe there was a data breach that they haven't yet reported to all of us. So it, our data is out there and maybe we just have to live with it. We're just so accessible. So
Well, that's a good way
that's
of
my,
scaring everybody, but no, I think it's
or
valuable.
just being on alert,
Yeah, yeah, and
always be
that's
on
one
alert.
way of looking at access, uh, which is people having access to you. And the other way is you having access to whoever it is that you want to gain entry to or with.
Correct.
Melissa, why don't you say hello, introduce yourself, and maybe some quick thoughts on access.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be here with Leslie and with Dawn. Real quick intro on me. I have a consultancy where I work with predominantly growth stage and startup brands in the fashion industry. But my real joy, my not work related joy is LinkedIn. And I really am passionate about building connection and building community here. And that's part of why I'm so excited to be here with everyone today. I have a very different thought about access than Leslie, but I do want to say her story is super relevant because just 2 days ago, one of my airline loyalty accounts was hacked and somebody booked a ticket in their name using my points. So I am going to say, like, Leslie's right, be diligent with protecting your information. Seriously. But access for me, so I immediately thought of it in the context of LinkedIn. And I thought about what an amazing amount of access we all have here just by being here. You all have access to this amazing show that Don does every single day. Every day he's putting people out there that add value, that add community, that, really give back to all of us. You have access to all of the people that you connect with, whether they're in your industry, in the industry you want to work in the future, in an industry that interests you, content creators that you find interesting. You have so much access, and there's so much knowledge and so much info that we can absorb every single day just by being on this platform. So that was really the first thing I thought of when it came to access.
Well, that's great, because that's where we start. And the key is where, when the show is over, what our new thoughts or insights into access is, based on knowledge share and based on just food for thought that we all share. But let me focus on the most important element of the show, which is the audience. Haken's here. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate you dedicating the time. Kelly's here. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Hi,
Kelly will be here Monday next week, Thursday next week. She's really one of the anchors and foundations for this show being as good as it is. She also has her own show with Christy Howard, the Awesome Journey. And I happened to be the guest last week. Very pleased. So thank you, Kelly. Steven's here. Actually, we're going to set up a call pretty soon. Good morning from humid, drizzly New York. Well, another person from a drizzly area.
It is.
Thank you, Stephen. Two of my favorite ladies, Natalie, who I just talked to last night, and she's actually going to be on the show Monday and Friday next week, I believe. So great talk that we had. And really she, as well as so many other people, align and relate to a safe, trusting place on LinkedIn, because if anything, what Leslie's important story and Melissa's story said is it's who you're with and who has access to you and who you have access to. Some people, you can give them your phone and you don't care what they do with it, right? Because you know it's safe and they're safe. And other times you have to be diligent. But one tip I would say is, most of the time when things like that happen, it's to freak you out. And then in that moment, you react instead of sit back and respond to it later. And then once you start putting things together, it doesn't make sense, right? Why would they ever ask for my information? And they shouldn't, because they're not real. But anyways, here's Scott, new name. Haven't seen you, Scott. Well, so good. I'm sure you know these two ladies. And that's another benefit of the show, is the collateral benefit. When you combine any two circles, they both get bigger, and it's amazing how little crossover in LinkedIn connections you have with somebody who's actually in the same field as you. It's usually about 10%. So if you get 30,000 groups, each one's picking up 27,000 that isn't connected with them. And that's the benefit of what we're doing, is combining forces and collaboratively doing things. Cindy's here. Cindy got a job. She was the celebration week. Stevens congratulating Kelly and Charity. Ashif is here. Ashif comes here almost every day. Hello all on this fine day. Kelly says something nice. Cindy comes back with, too many crooks out there. Yeah, stay away. When the prince, okay. Yeah, I can relate to that. Anyway, cool, Leslie. Here's Natalie. Great interpretation of word access. Ladies feel blessed for access to care, health care, and medication. I woke up with a rash. Oh gosh, I had that. Every day away from it is better. So hopefully you only improve. Coincidence, I was at the bank this morning, just changed my ATM PIN. You never know who's following you. If you got to spend half your time on defense, look at all the time you waste. You could have had for something proactive. Dean's here. I hope it's getting cooler down in Texas. I know you're dealing with a heat wave. Love how some of us here have access. Unfortunately, some of the old gatekeeping mindsets still exist. Well, you don't
very
need
much.
You don't need approvals, you can take direct initiative and take action. Feeling blessed, Hickam says, being diligent is smart. I recently accidentally looked at my detail. Oh man, we should have just a show on fraud. Use that as the
Yes.
key.
I didn't mean to go off in a different direction.
It's okay. That's what the show
It
is meant
just
to
happened.
do. No. It's fine because we're getting people who are bringing things up. And, the key to the show is never feeling like you're alone. Everything that happens to you is happening to someone else in a different way at a different time, but it's human. A greater interpretation of the word access. I feel blessed. Okay, we just covered that. Let me see if there's something a little bit meatier. I actually have okay, great. Anyways, now we're back to access. So I believe, Leslie, what with all this new interaction comes to mind?
So first I want to say, I'm glad to have had this scheduled on my calendar today because it really helped me shake off yesterday afternoon. And it's just confirmation of like things happen. I fixed it now. Like I'm just on higher alert, which is good. And we just move on and you just keep your alert up. But as far as how Melissa described LinkedIn, I just have to echo it. I wouldn't know her if it wasn't for LinkedIn. I remember some posts of hers that somehow I came upon and I commented, and I remember she wrote, well, if the conflict strategist, supports my posts, I don't know, I'm probably changing the words. And it just like started like, oh, what? She was one of the first people who like reacted to my comment. So that made me think, oh, I have to go back to her post the next day. And I kept on going, and there we were, connected, and eventually met in person, and we've met in person a few times. And that's the access that I wouldn't have had. And even it does compare to the workplace where the executives in their ivory tower, and I used to be involved in office design, and I would always say, no, we're not creating that. Like that upper floor should be like the conference room floor. You're gonna sit with the people, like you want to talk to people. So, but too many companies, people arrive and they don't feel like they belong. And how can you really create access to conversations, to people, to making people feel that they can speak up? That's the value that you get when you hire someone. You don't want like a robotic doing of the job. You want to hear their creative ideas, their crazy ideas, who knows, and their different ideas. And I find that the focus on sameness and agreeing is preventing people from speaking up.
Melissa, what could you add to that?
Yeah,
Insight.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes I had a really interesting experience with someone that I work with where she and I, had one of our one-on-one touch bases, and she actually told me that she thought she was struggling in her role. And I didn't really have that perception, right? I actually thought she was fairly new to the organization, and I thought she was actually doing pretty well. It's always hard when you first start, join something new, a new team, new ways of working. And she said, sometimes I feel like you step in and do things without giving me the chance to do them myself. And it's funny because I view myself as actually very the opposite. I view myself as a super, I'm not a very micromanaging type of person. I hate being micromanaged, and I never do that with anyone else. But it was interesting to me that there were times that she felt like, so I felt like, okay, this conversation has gone on for too long. Let me step in and like support her and kind of just clean it up and let's move forward. But she viewed it more as, you are kind of cutting off my access to this conversation. You're kind of coming in to save the day, but I don't need you yet. So that was really interesting to me. And it was probably the first time anyone's ever said that. And so I'm really cognizant of it now, right? Like if I'm going to step into a conversation that people that report to me or cross-functional partners of mine are having, do I really need to do it? Am I really helping, or am I just kind of tired of this going back and forth and I want to end it? I thought that was really an interesting experience for me. And I really agree with you about the whole ivory tower thing and not having an executive floor. I'm very big on collaborative meetings. I always, when I was in a much more corporate role and I had a really big team, I always made sure that we had step level meetings. It just wasn't me and my directs, right? Because what about the people that reported to them? They wanted access to me. They wanted to know what I was thinking, what was next for the organization, what was coming along that they needed to prepare for and they needed to know about. So I think that's super important, and always giving everyone in your organization and your team access to you.
Well, that's so valuable. I hope people are kind of taking some notes, and if you really don't have to, because you can always watch the replay later and spend more attention to this. But I think access is a lot to do with culture, right? Some cultures don't allow a lot of access, and some do. I mean, when you talk about open doors policies, is the door always open for everyone all the time, right? Or is it just something people say because it's a nice thing to say and a nice thing to hear? But you've got to work at access to open it up, to invite people in. If you really believe in it, you want to generate and practice more of it, because I think through access, you get understanding. Ignorance gets created when things get locked away from people, or people get locked away from it. And, the power is within you. Too many people have had in the past, traditionally, to seek access, right? If you want something, this person's got to sign off on it, or you've got to be approved for it. And, now you're dependent on other people who have their own ulterior motives, possibly, that don't want you to have access. I mean, there's people hire worse than they are to keep what they have, and there's people who hire better than they are to build on the people they're bringing in. And I think access is whether it's growing or it's dying. Is it something that is a benefit? And some people have access they wish they never had. It's like they put me in this department, I wish I was in my old one, or I was, all that stuff. But before we get too deep into all this, let's get back to all these people. We'll just start with Kinga's here. Kinga's great. Had a conversation. We'll have her on the show. I don't know how to pronounce your first name, but okay, a space for one more, I'm sure. Let's go to Cindy, has something to say. Absolutely, Leslie, you want to know you have access to speak to your manager, make suggestions, or either collaborate or make sure you don't, and then you'll just have to make some accommodation along the way. Ashif says, access to allow and or to let in, it can be quite empowering at many levels. A lot of times, create your own access. Be the master of your own destiny. And, I only had a job, like I say, when I was 15 for 2 years, and I never had to interview or worry about getting fired. I just had to make sure the company could pay the bills. But and that takes some different kind of access. But, I think it's really what makes you happy with the freedom you have. And access usually tends to relate to freedom. Limited access means I've got limited freedom. And if someone opens it up, and then I think access relies on trust, right? People will give you more access if they trust you, and eventually they'll let you take care of things for them without them having to be there. So I think that's access. So a few more people here. A lot of people saying hello to each other. Scott, I never hire anyone I wouldn't be willing to work for. And this breeds 360-degree access. So true, because I always wanted to do the job that I was going to hire somebody for, so I would understand what it is and appreciate what they have to do to get it done. And again, that's an understanding situation for most. I work for a Danish-owned company flat and tons of action. There was purchased by a Jap, no access. Well, again, that relates to culture.
Yes.
You know, people treat people differently because of where they're from and how they're used to getting treated themselves. So you model your managers coming up to do what you did with them when other people come up to them. Kinga says, I was known for being a loudmouth at work, and I was proud of it. I called it transparency. We hid information, and too many people were willing to say things to some groups that they weren't willing to say in front of other groups. Yeah, the politics, the bureaucracy, that is like so many speed bumps on the road to access, you know, and you wonder if we're all here for the benefit of each other and the company. You know, I guess that comes down to leadership, you know, who allows that to happen and who knows what's happening. Hi, Dr. Constance. Had my first audio event yesterday, and Dr. Constance was there, and then we had a long conversation afterwards on Zoom. So we're looking to put some things together. Wendy's here. Always love seeing Wendy. Thank you for
Hi, Wendy.
Scott is here. Let me just see.
I
Constance.
think LinkedIn user, and she can tell us if we're right. That might be Charity.
Or it could be, I saw her name, or I know Roxanne
Yes.
is LinkedIn user too. So whoever you are, you're welcome to be here.
Yes.
Leslie, we caught up with comments, a lot of different facets and insights that we're bringing to the table.
Well, you said a word that really connects with access, trust. And it reminded me of a story that luckily this happened early in my career. So I thought access to everyone was typical. My manager trusted me. And there were plenty of times I worked for the government at that time. And I was working on a number of large construction projects. And the mayor's office of operations needed someone to come and describe the project. She goes, I don't have time to listen to all your details. Just go yourself. I'm like, really? She's like, yes, just mention that you're from our department. So, because she knew that I wasn't just going to take and grandstand that like I'm it. And it was the greatest access that I got. I went to community board meetings. I learned how to present. I mean, initially I was a very shy person. That was very uncomfortable for me to even go to these meetings where I didn't know these people. But she trusted me, and she knew that I was not going to grandstand, take over her position, so to speak, or maybe one day I would. And she didn't mind that because she knew we were both going to grow together versus if I grow, she loses, or if she grows, I lose. It was just like, we're just both going to grow.
That is so important. Like, I forget who said it a little while ago. I know Don was alluding to it. I know so many people who don't get jobs, and the sort of feedback or the general feeling is that the hiring manager was afraid of them. The hiring manager saw that they were too strong and they felt threatened. And that's just such a bad mindset, because how can you grow and get to the next level if nobody can take your place?
Exactly.
If you're always going to leave this gap of skill and gap of access and gap of knowledge, you're never going to go anywhere, because the company is going to think you're too valuable where you are and they can't elevate you. So I think that's such an important distinction.
Well, I think another distinction is, who are you talking to? So if you're talking to somebody who owns the business and has everything involved in the business, they have to look for the best people, right? Because they're not worried about job security. They're not worried about politics. I mean, if you've got control over your business, what you want to do is survive and prosper in time. And whoever comes in the door that can take on more than someone else or take on more from you. And the other thing I think people don't always realize, people aren't looking for what you think they're looking for or what you have, right? When I was, I was founder and CEO of my own companies, and just giving me something that was bigger, better, faster, but could have been intrusive or distracting. And the other half was, what are you going to do to make my life happier and better for you being around me? Because you got to be with those people. They're not robots. And, I tell everybody, people are like elevator buttons. Some take you up and some take you down. And, if they're not happy, if they're not smiling, if they're not looking you in the eye and being comfortable, that disqualifies them right there, because if they can't sell you on who they are, and that's the biggest sale they're going to have to make, how are they going to sell your stuff to someone else? And people are always fooled by accomplishments instead of what did those accomplishments develop you into? Because even when I hired people, I said, it's not how much you make here, it's who you become here. Money comes and goes, and money will never be as protective as knowledge, and more importantly, as your network. Because if you have nothing and everybody around you has something, you're covered, right? It's just the way it is. And when we talk about access, it's access to access. And what that means is, in my earlier days, I was doing tremendous. And I used to go to New York, and there was a company called Lear Friedman, and they were the publishers of all the chain store news, discount store news. I mean, it was all, like tabloid almost. And I got to know everybody there, including the publisher and everybody. And somehow, because of that, they would invite me to these huge annual events with these 20. If the plane would have went down, the stock market would have lost that day. It was really the top founders, CEOs, people like Home Depot and those companies. And people would always ask me, how did you get here? You only got like 12 stores, and, we're national. And I would say, well, first of all, I'm good conversation. I keep things moving around here. And I'm so small, I can never hurt you with anything you tell me. So I might be the only person you could trust here. And it went on for years. And I had access to, I don't want to name drop, but people were coming to see us for like 3 days in New York. We take over the whole Rainbow Room. We take over the Russian Tea Room back then. It was just cruise to New Jersey and eat over there and come back. It's just amazing. So the point is, if you can get access to access, who has it? And one last thing, I met a gentleman there who turned out to be a billionaire, and we were partners for 12 years. So when you say, you met Leslie on LinkedIn, you never know, but you have to be open and you have to be accessible. And the reason I met this gentleman is we're eating dinner last night. We're in Dallas at the mansion at Turtle Creek, and this guy gives me an elbow. And I'm like, hey, when anybody gives you an elbow, you wonder what's going on. And he says, I just wanted to know if you're going to eat your cheesecake. And I said, I never touched it, please. And I got a glass of wine, never touch it either, have it. And I went back to thinking, and he started, well, I see you're from Denver. My grandkids are in Denver. I'm going to Denver. And all of a sudden, that's how it started. Now, if I would have said, no, I'm still going to eat it, I would have never known what 12 years in advance was going to do. And you just never know. So why don't you trust to give access to everybody until you actually know who it is, right? There's so many people go into Mercedes dealerships and they look like bums, and no one will even talk to them. And they go up to the manager and says, I want to buy two, but nobody even sees me here. So anyways, I can get off, but hopefully that gave you a little bit of real life access. Let me see. We'll say, Ashiv, I no longer appreciate inclusive access, what I stand behind, because if it's VIP to you, it's VIP to everybody around you,
Yes.
Leslie, take it away.
Well, I see that someone else loves cheesecake. So even you talking about cheesecake kind of like put my mind on cheesecake, but I'll get off of that because New York does have a lot of good cheesecake. So access, like trust, I want to add, like, I can gain access by being curious. It's the same way just in conversations, but then in the reverse, just even leading meetings or being in conversations with people, I'm providing access if I stay curious with them, because then they'll even mirror that curiosity. But most of the time it's because of a question I've asked and they're like, oh wow, you really want to know something about me. And then when they leave, they feel like they've had access. Some people need the invitation, and we have to invite with our words, our actions, and those speak loudly. Like, hey, we've heard people say, I've worked for companies, oh, yes, we all have an open door policy. I'm like, what in the world does that mean? You're in these, like, your formal offices, you never come out from, to the front of your desk. You're always sitting in those, huge desks that were scary. Like if you were young or inexperienced or had any doubt about yourself. So, if you want to have an open door policy, you don't have to tell me, you have to do it by, like, in a meeting, making sure that we all can speak up. Don't have like a half-hour meeting where 25 of us are sitting there and you just dish out information you could have written in a document. Let's have a conversation. Why else am I in a meeting? Because we have too many meetings. So I think it can, within an organization, I think it can start with how you conduct meetings. Can convince people you have an open door policy if you really open the door and let everyone talk.
That's admirable. So what do you think, Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I love any dessert, so my mind went there too. Don't worry. I'm a massive dessert fan. I think a lot of it also is what you said, Don. Make your own access. And I've seen people who are so skilled at that, and it just comes second nature to them. It doesn't come second nature to me. I actually work really hard at putting myself out there. Leslie, like you were speaking about how you used to be very shy and it was really hard for you to go to these community board meetings. I was very that way too. I am a very private person. It's very hard for me to put myself out there. Even just posting content was really hard for me at first, right? You just think, oh my God, what are people going to think? Or is it going to resonate with anyone? But it's really just kind of pushing yourself past that, whether it's online, whether it's in the office, whether it's with a stranger in a restaurant, right? Like, seriously, what if you had said, no, get out of here, I'm going to eat that cheesecake? I think a lot of access is very serendipitous, right? You can't always plan it. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you just have to create those opportunities and create those openings for yourself. But otherwise, it's just being open to what life is going to put in front of you and being open and receptive when the universe, I'm going to sound like really woo-woo, but when the universe like gives you that signal or gives you that opportunity, are you going to take it? Are you going to recognize it and take it? Or are you going to let it pass you by because you're too distracted or you're too unsure or you're too scared? Just honestly, go for it, right? What's the worst that can happen? And having that shift in how I think about things has really, really made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And, when I'm thinking of what everybody's saying when they're saying it, access has a lot to do with responsibility and accountability, right? Because even if someone trusts you, if you bumble the whole thing, the chances of them letting you or allowing you to do it again gets limited. So you have to earn access every time you use access, right? If someone says, here's my house key, I'm going to be gone for a week, can you put the newspaper in? And you forget to lock the door when you leave, right? Then that trust is so hard to build and so easy to lose. And if people look at responsibility for the access, and some people don't want access, right? It's like, I don't want to walk into your house. You got a huge dog that's not friendly. You can keep that access for someone else. And, it's choosing access and how much you need of it. I mean, you go to the grocery store, you buy what you're going to use maybe in a couple days or a week. You don't worry about if milk is ever going to show up on the counter again. And I think being in the now allows you fair access, because if you drag the past forward, that's going to influence someone who had nothing to do with what influenced you, right? Everything happens to everybody all the time, but when it happens to you, it becomes far more important. right? And you learn more about it, and you don't even know it exists. So I think that the key with community is to have community access, which is smaller access, but stronger access, and knowing you're not alone. The whole idea is you can't do it. Could we do it together? And a lot of times you could, because unless someone's attracting that because of how they appear. I mean, when we talk about words, a lot of it has to do with delivery, tone, facial expression. So all of a sudden it takes a life of whatever you bring to it. And then, people tend to shut down your available access if you're not very inviting, right? It's like, hey, you can come in, but I may not be here, or something like that. Well, then skip it, or that there's a lot to do with it. And I guess access is definitely determined by more than yourself, right? You can, because without someone else, what are you accessing? But then again, I guess you could say internally, how much do you access your heart versus your mind, right? How much do you access so many wonderful people in your life who created your opportunities for you and you take for granted, or when it's a special occasion, you bring them out. And I think it's all about reinvention and regeneration. So with that, Leslie, we're almost
Yeah.
at the halfway point.
Yep. So a few things that both of you said, and even in the comments when it was something about access to healthcare, because it all reminded me of a story where access isn't just that someone gives us an invitation, like Melissa said, like we have to take the lead to get the access. And I had a little bit of a detour in my career, although if I explained it, it makes complete sense. But I was a legal guardian to numerous people that were not related to me, court appointed. I got that because I had access to a judge who I actually met on a food line, and he didn't know where to get the beverages, and that started our whole relationship. I showed him where the Diet Coke was. Um, and then it turns out I didn't know I was speaking to this judge who would eventually change my career. So I got appointed as a legal guardian, and I kept on getting appointed because the judge would say, how in the world did you get those people all these different benefits? And some of them were healthcare. And I said, I just kept on calling and asking. And she said, what? I said, I called. Someone said no. I called the next day and asked a different person. I said, I just kept on calling to ask. And she's like, wow, like you got access to all these benefits that these people hadn't gotten in years. She's like, oh, I got another case for you. And it was just learning that thing of just ask. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, or maybe, or let me put you on the phone with someone else. And when they did say no, I'm like, well, is there someone else I can talk to? How can I get a yes out of you? So I think we do have to take the lead. And I do think how you ask matters a lot, because it was this tone of voice rather than me, even if I felt angry and wanted to vent or wanted to cry. Sometimes that worked too. Um, it did matter how I delivered the question, because someone would want to help, and then they started providing access to me.
Well, if you look at access, it's kind of like a gift, and how do you package and present it, is so essential. But I'll turn it over to Melissa after I have a chance to recognize some more people. Stephen says, I've worked long enough in corporate to know when access is being hindered. I've seen managers regularly say that they're in a meeting as an excuse for I'm too busy to talk to you because I'm pulled into too many directions. That stifles open communication. Here's
Absolutely.
one from Hagen. My first boss was my mom for 10 years. I guess I had access, but it was a bit difficult. And I had all my kids in my business with me for 8 years, and that was a treat in a good way. VIP access, I no longer appreciate. Okay. Inclusiveness. Here's Scott, who says that might have been on Neil's post. Let me go here. interviewers are really thinking you're going to make my life easier or harder. That's it. You're so right. Unless they fear you, because they're hiring for the company, but they're already also hiring for themselves. How loyal are you? How easy are you to talk to? Is everything a yes or no? Do you go into a little more detail? And are you familiar with the protocol of having a conversation? Because in most cases, when I interviewed people, I'd ask a question and I'd get a 20-minute answer. And it's like, just answer the question and then wait for the next question. And you know, it is an art form, interviewing and being an interviewer. And I'll say one thing: there's a lot of people who make decisions on your future who aren't qualified to be in an interviewer position. They're just not. They're a fish out of water. Someone just decided anybody could do it, and they found an anybody. Ambambola is here. Thank you. Our ambassador from Nigeria. I would love to know a billionaire just to see the other half. But you know what? You have no idea how hard it is to manage that much money. And that was his complaint is, you know, I got to hire these accountants and lawyers and this and save this and trust this. I mean, it's a lot more. You know, they say to be rich is all you need is $1 more than you could spend, you know, and you're there. Let me see. Here we go. Anshift says, sometimes not allowing access can be right, for sure. Scott comes back with the open door access is often best demonstrated in a neutral site, the conference room, the break room, a walk around the building. Some supporters might be
walk around. I love walk around. You know,
my daughter worked with me for 8 years. Every afternoon we take a 30-minute walk. You know, and you know, and every day I take my son to lunch. You know, and it was just, and I do that with everybody. I'd invite 9 people to lunch. It's like, hey, get this department. Let's have a nice lunch, because it's not just open door. It's genuinely being open through the whole time you're at work. Right? I used to have bowling parties every month, bring everybody's family for free. You start to meet uncles and grandparents and parents, and it becomes, you know, something deeper than a job, you know, and what you save on rehiring, retention, shrinkage, lack of performance. I mean, people, their treasure is what they have inside of themselves, and your goal is to bring it forward. Right, to help them manifest, and then it spreads. You know, just like bad policy spreads around and makes for bad culture. The other way too, Leslie. Do you find it's open door till you ask the hard question? What do you say? No, it's Melissa's turn, so you can take that and answer for Leslie.
Oh gosh. Sometimes, sure. I mean, sometimes if you ask a question nobody wants to answer, they're just not going to answer it. You know, they'll come up with a really creative banter that doesn't answer the question at all. It'll just sound like they are. There's so many things I want to talk about, because there's so many things that you said and so many things that I saw in the comments. And so I'm just going to pick one, which is, I saw a comment, I think it was from Stephen, about, you know, we talk about open door, but then the boss is in their office and everybody else is in their cubicle with their heads down, hiding because they don't want to be watched. They're afraid of, you know, being in trouble. I think that really speaks to part of access is trust, right? And if we don't trust the people that work for us, like, I'm horrified by all this technology that I see out there, like, you know, keyboard tracking and keystroke monitoring and knowing how many times you move your mouse. And you have to trust your people, right? If you have to put software monitoring on your people, then you either have the wrong people or there's something wrong with you. And I mean that sincerely. Like, this is not what a workplace is supposed to be. A workplace is supposed to be trust. It's supposed to be collaboration. It's supposed to be learning together, growing together. goals are always for the best result for the company, right? That's what we're paid for. We're paid to deliver the best results for the company, but we want the best results for each other too, right? I mean, if we don't, then what are we doing there? I view the people that I work with and the people that I worked with in the past, I don't want to say they're family because I actually hate that expression. And there are some very dysfunctional families out there, so that's not necessarily a compliment, but they're people that I care about, right? Especially if you're in an office 24, yeah, no, not 24/7. If you're in an office 5 days a week now, especially, which some people are now, you spend more time with those people that you work with than with many other people in your life. And even if you're in a remote or a hybrid situation, you're still interacting with those people more than many other people in your life. So how do you not care about them genuinely? Trust is really important, and trust and access really do go hand in hand.
Yeah,
do.
I mean, it makes so much sense. And, what I think of is no matter who you're working for, whoever signs your check you're working for yourself at the end of the day, because there isn't the loyalty there used to be. There was almost an unsaid assurance that if you're here, you could retire here. IBM had that policy. They never even had a layoff up until like the 70s or 80s.
Gold watch,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, 30 years with IBM was a great retirement. I mean, but that's not here. And it does help everybody else, because if you're not hiring for 20 years, like, ageism doesn't come into play. If you're going to turn around people every year or two, you're just looking for a year or two. And let's be honest with people. And people are looking for a year or two too. So now everything changes faster. Everything's more dynamic. And that's where creating some side hustles, some extra streams of income, where you're not having all your eggs in one basket or another person. I think the other important element is whoever you're communicating with, can you freely communicate? And if you can't, then you're never going to be able to ask the question why. Because people don't want to hear why when they're in an authoritative situation, or where they're just used to saying, hey, decision's made, let's get it done. And if you can't say why, you might as well not even have the conversation, because you might just say, text it to me and I'll, you lose that, because it's the way it is. It's not the way you want it to be. But if people come through as being empty to you, how do you get full for them? And I think the other side of the workplace thing, because, after working from home for the last 3, 4, 5 years, I realized how little constructive time you have at work for the amount of time you put in. So when you got to figure transportation to and from, getting ready, getting dressed, parking, walking to your office, passing the water fountain and hearing the latest stuff, people jumping into your office as soon as you show up with whatever they have, then a meeting shows up, then it's time for lunch, then another meeting, and then you're home, and the last thing you're thinking about is working, because you put 10 hours in from the time you started to the time you got home, versus, hey, if I'm home, I'm working 24 hours whenever I'm available or want to work. But that's based on the trust of the individual. I know people work at home and they really do work just like 8 hours. I mean, they're dedicated. And there's people working from home. It's like, if the people only knew what these people were doing every day, So anyways, what it does say, there's all kinds of conditions. Everything's relative to whatever it is. And I think also you have to be comfortable with the environment you're in. And some people just love direction. They don't want to think too much, and other people like to talk and like to understand. And I think that's part of an employment workplace's benefit, is allowing people to share and learn, because you can benefit the company. Leslie?
I'm going to comment on one of the last things that you mentioned, that, some people speak up and share a lot. I think the manager and the leadership, who typically lately have not been trained well to be managers and leaders, the ones that are good and the ones that have, they understand that we have to check in with people, and checking in is not going to be the same for every person. So the we may be in a meeting, everyone wants it. Hey, what are you challenged with? They may ask all the right questions. How can I support you? And maybe I still won't speak up. I may have the trust, but I don't want to necessarily, maybe I don't have the trust with everyone else yet in the room, or I'm uncomfortable. So that's when you have to create access. Like there has to be different paths where someone said uh, something about doing a walk around meeting. I used to love that because there were certain people, they really wouldn't speak up if we were looking face to face. Suddenly, when we were shoulder to shoulder, we had some of our most dynamic conversations. And just recognizing that, and it probably takes a lot of emotional intelligence, recognizing that people are different, people will interact different, and the real leader, whether it's the manager or someone else on the team, recognizes that and will start doing those different kind of check-ins and interactions with people. And I didn't consciously know that. I remember I had a great manager who pointed something out. She was in a meeting of mine and she said, I don't even think you realize the best thing you do in the meeting. I'm like, what? She's like, you gave all these options at the end, but you pursue them. Like I said, well, if you have additional thoughts, send me an email, or if you want, set up a quick phone appointment. And you went and checked with each person at some point, informally and formally, to ask them what they thought of the content.
Yeah,
So I really invited the access. I pulled it from some people.
well, I think that's very important and valuable. And what I noticed when I had all these people working with me and for me, at one point I had 72 people under one roof with me, and more than 70% were technology people. I mean, so, they're not always the most communicative. Uh, is when people get to know each other, they get to trust each other just from knowing each other. If they don't know each other, they use their preconceived understandings or experiences to label people. And what I always loved the most is when people would come in after hours. I mean, when I was just calling and want to sit down and talk for a little bit or share. I mean, it's like the people came there early, the people stayed late and actually wanted to be there. And I created, hopefully, an environment that was probably, in most cases, the best place those people would ever be that day. A lot of people came from challenging situations, financial, relationships, a million things. And when they found a group that cared for them, that looked out for them, and you don't have to look out for the company if you have everybody looking out for the company individually. And when you build a happy home, nobody wants a home breaker. And so if somebody you hired and you didn't filter enough came in, you would hear about it. The other way is you had to terminate someone, and it's like 20 stories just shows up in your office the next 2 days on, well, I did. Let me tell you what happened with her or him. And it's like, well, why didn't you tell me when it was happening? Maybe I wouldn't have had to stay with this decision. So, it's codependency in a way, is people depend on the other people taking care of them, and that hey, I'm going to take care of you to keep that going. And I think that's where you got to keep initiating, being proactive. If your ideas and your energy and your feelings don't count, you're learning more from that than you are staying with that job. And it's important. And once you figure it out, now you know it. Now it's your responsibility to deal with it, because if it goes the other way, you already had the red flag. But it also says, I'm going to prepare my escape here. I just saw something and found some out that I just don't feel aligned with. And that's a tough decision, because I think a question people have to ask themselves for access is the price of access worth it? Is what do I have to give to get this? And, you know, as you get older, money becomes less important, you know, and people say, no matter how much money they gave me, I would never do it, but they've never been presented with the check and the option. Now here's your $1 million. Would you do this? And that's when integrity shows up. They say integrity is what happens in the dark, you know, when no one sees you or what you're doing. But you see, right? And that's part of access, is being proud of having access, that you earned it, that you worked for it, that you deserve it. And you're happy when not everybody has access who didn't do it. You know, I mean, there's something to cutting in front of you, you know, in line. And that's something you could probably absorb, but in a professional or career or a very important part of your life, that's hard, you know? And I think that's part of it. Aharon, I had a conversation with him. Nice that you're here. Natalie, as technology advances, I feel that tools like smartphones and Kelly have inadvertently made access to others less easy. Well, you know what it is? The people who know more take advantage of more and then take advantage of more people. So, you know, it's where are you in the forefront of what are you doing? And technology is not going away. It's only going to get, you know, when people say AI or, you know, chat GPT, I'm like, hey, it's a great tool if you know how to use it, and you should. You know, and everything in technology is a double-edged sword. If it's used and applied properly, it can have huge value. And the other, also, here's a comment, very true. I dislike being given a calendar. Well, the only challenge with that is when you're making 22 appointments a week.
Yes.
And you're changing stuff and adding stuff. I don't even always keep up with my calendar. Unless in other words, oh, I thought that was 11:30 and it's 11. You know, I always hate it when it's like I just missed. And, you know, you hate when people miss too, but I also know you're more forgiving when you're also the one who does what it is and you understand how easy it is. And, you know, first time for anything, I'm cool with, you know,
Yes.
and usually by 3 strikes, definitely out, because even if it's a coincidence, it's like there's too much of this and there's too
Yes.
many people in the world. And I think that's what people should come from, is a attitude of abundance and not scarcity. You're one person in this big planet. I mean, if you take a city like New York or a country, there's hundreds of millions of people. Why would you ever stop to figure out a stranger? I mean, it makes no sense. You know, why not start building with the people around you? You know, that whole story of Acres of Diamonds, which I won't go into, you know, defines that whole thing. Is sometimes you're sitting on the diamonds, you're ready to go after and discover somewhere else. Dean's here. Dean's a great guy. If possible, don't accept a no without a why. Well, until you ask why, will you know if you're going to get anything? And the other thing is, it's not what they say, it's how they react, right? You can tell if someone's being sincere, you know, or they're kind of going halfway and not totally. And, you know, after a while, it's like, okay, I get it. You know, there's no sense having to take this any further. Leslie has some YouTube videos that speak to how you open a conversation with a coach. You know, that's very valuable, Scott, because there's so much to YouTube. There's so much to Google, you know. And actually, I make it a practice when I want to learn something, I'll dedicate 30 minutes to about 6 5-minute YouTube videos. At least I'll be conversational, got some insight, you know, and that's access. You have access to knowledge and insight. You know, growing up, all you had was the encyclopedia at home. And if you didn't keep up with it, was old news or the library, which had an encyclopedia there. The nice thing is everybody was just as far behind on everything, you know, and everything was slower, and you never had a phone, and no one ever needed to figure out what they needed at the grocery store without a phone, or calling somebody up every 10 minutes. I had a creepy manager who would walk around though, and it felt very performative. You have to stop and pay attention to random people, ask questions about, you know, when you work for yourself long enough, you become unemployable. right? Because somebody would say, "What'd you have for lunch?" I said, "None of your business. I'm out of here." You know, how intrusive can you be? You know, or what were you doing before you got? It's like, hey, but that's how it is. And maybe that's how it should be because you know, I had both of my kids work 1 year when they were 16 for at least a year to know what it is to work for somebody and never want to do it again, but also know what it is to have someone work for you. And my daughter ended up staying there for 3.5 years. She loved it. My son, the day a year was up, was gone, you know. And actually, he came in last night from Baltimore, so I'm so excited. Uh, Great guy.
That's sweet.
Oh yeah, wonderful boy. And I got a great daughter. So loyalty might be gone in part due to the remote environment. Walking halls of our old organizations was more special than people realize. You know, and that's the thing is give people credit for realizing stuff on their own. You know, some people are supervising people that are better off without their supervision, that the supervision impacts them. You know, you feel like someone's looking over your shoulder, crowding you. It's like not comfortable.
Horrible.
Yeah. Access to myself would allow me to embrace my life-changing alignments, mind, body, and soul, another level of access. You know, access is everywhere you step forward to, right? It could be a door, it could be another road, it could be anything. But I think the key to access is moving forward, being progressive, you know, and being kind to everybody around you. You know, everybody's expecting someone else to be kind first or start the conversation, but that almost means like you've got a debt that hasn't been repaid from that person before you can do any more. You know, I think everything's reciprocal, but it doesn't say when you start reciprocating, right? Maybe you got to give a little bit more often to get it rolling, or you find out, hey, it's a one-way street here. You know, better to find out early. Kinga says we want authenticity, empathy, and inclusive environments. It's all BS if we don't have access and trusted decision makers.
Yes.
If someone doesn't give me access, they don't get access. And, you know, but you can't always do that in the workplace. But you should, because workplaces should be open conversations and everybody should be resilient enough, confident enough to hear what somebody else says without taking it personal or without finding some element of truth or value to it. Because sometimes you just need a little bit. You don't need the whole serving. You know, that's what seasoning is about. Beverly's here. Beverly's going to be here this week, I believe, with Leslie Flowers. Everyone has a different learning style and working style, and that has to be respected. That's what inclusivity, valuing diversity is all about, is embracing people. Letting them in without an embrace is just, okay, you're a few feet closer than you were, you know, but you're still not in, even though you think you are. And that's the difference between real, unreal, and, you know, something that makes you feel like, hey, this was true versus this was, you know, given for a reason, but it's really for another reason and makes you dilute whatever the value is that you just received. It is vital that we differentiate the huge difference between managers and leaders. So true.
Yes.
Rita says, and Rita's great. Rita's going to be here. She's on Wednesdays. True, things change every day now. Only constant is change. You know, and once you know that, you know it. Natalie says, I agree that for you and many busy individuals, Calendly is a wonderful tool. My husband will most likely lose his mind without it. Yeah, it's so true. Learning now is more knowing how and where to get information than memorizing data. You know, and that's schools for so long. It's like one with the War of 1812 or something and things like that. It took your mind off important things like what were you doing just now before that. I love that. That's a quote right there. When you work for yourself long enough, you become unemployable. Thank you. It's true. And you wonder, why do I trust somebody I don't know, doesn't care about me and knows less than I do to help me in my future, right? When the people who you're working for, you wouldn't even want working for you. How do you work for them? You know, it just, you know, if it wasn't for money, things would be different. You know, if you gave everybody $1 million tomorrow, they'd be walking out of their jobs in record time. No questions asked. Long time no see. Here's a walk around meetings are powerful
That's
because of the body language of standing shoulder to shoulder. Everyone is reciprocating at an even pace on the same plan.
yes.
You know, they say fish can only grow as big as the bowl you put them in, right? And sometimes an office, I hate that when I'm on the other side of it, you know, and they got a bigger chair, I got a smaller chair. They're sitting there
Yep.
with all their stuff on the table, and I'm sitting there with my hands looking for a place to go. And then you got to listen to them when you're walking. You know, it's like going to the baseball game with a client or going golfing, right? You got time to see things, walk around. There's no rush. If you're in somebody's office, you almost feel like you're taking time from them, or they're giving time to you. You know, either way, it's not a balanced, equal situation. I think we pretty much caught up. Here we go. Access is emotional intelligence in action, messy or clean. And you know, the other thing I'll say,
Brilliant.
smile, laugh when you get access, you know, create a better mood, a better energy. You can do that. Again, it's packaging and presentation. And you know, when people like people who light up a room, you know, who are like, hey, she came in, hey, everything's happy again. Everybody, you know, is glad to see everybody. And then they start initiating, you know, it's almost like the opening act, right? They got to get the audience ready and upbeat. And then the main performer shows up. And you got to look at yourself as a star to become a star, right? You've got to recognize you're a star first before it's in the sky and before anybody else sees it. And you keep reinforcing it. And that's who gets ahead. I swear to you, the people who make you feel better, you know, and they can only make you feel better if you trusted them. If when you rely on them, they come through for you. I can't tell me how many restructurings and turnarounds I did. I get rid of half the people and get more work done with less trouble. Right? Because the managers were better at doing the work than the people were working for them, and they had to keep correcting them and training them. And it's like, hey, just let me do it, you know? And that's where I see is people build up stuff, you know, that at a certain point needs to be expressed and then really tighten. So anyways, getting off, it's 1:07 and 15 seconds. I don't mind going a little bit over if we have any questions, but this has been a wonderful session. It's Saturday. I'm not as top of hour conscious, but I'd love to have Leslie share her thoughts of the show and Access now after an hour of starting out with Access.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Melissa, for being here. It was great. I was actually taking a few notes, so I'm just going to quickly say a few things. Stephen Eng, thank you for those comments about walk around. Totally agree. Scott, yes, I have friends who I met over the wall of those cubicles. And I think that goes back to I think ideal is hybrid, because I think those water cooler moments, meeting people in the elevator, that's what gave me access to, you know, people who I just met, you know, at the casual spots. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, that was the head of that other organization. Wow, I didn't even realize that. We were just real people. And last, it became the real leaders in an organization or in the room are not the ones with the titles. So, or often are not the ones with the titles. So I think it reminds all of us, no matter what your title is, business owner, vice president, executive vice president, whatever it is, take the lead. Take the lead in communication, take the lead in offering and inviting access, and it will really change your career and even your satisfaction with being in the workplace. So with that, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend and some sun, or send some to us in New York, please.
Well, that's great, Leslie. And it's always a pleasure and honor to have you on the show because you do bring so many wonderful insights and perspectives. And I think it's really about taking something that you already have gotten used to using for a certain purpose with a certain definition and see how you could expand those definitions and purposes and take time, buy some vowels before you solve the puzzle, like Wheel of Fortune, and
I agree with Scott. Did you see that comment? He says the leaders are the ones with the heart. Show your heart.
well, that's valuable because why not? I mean, if you're going to do something, put all of yourself into it. You don't want to be the reason it didn't work, that you held back or you didn't trust. And I think if you go in with confidence in anything you do, because I do believe success is an attitude, and confidence is something people pick up right away when you're decisive, how you move, how everything counts. And in this AI world, that's the only thing you can count on is the person you're actually physically with in the moment that you're talking to and you're seeing. And too many people have lost access because of COVID, because of fear, because of insulation and isolation. And LinkedIn Live gives you an opportunity to be safe in your own living room or office with people you could have never met any other way, and met in a way that's cost and time efficient in 1 hour with 60, 70 people sharing knowledge between each other, with us, and back and forth, and doing this every day incrementally. It's like going to a power gym, and not overdoing it and knocking yourself out, but coming here and saying, hey, this is a great group to learn from, to be part of, because it makes you feel better when you leave here. And that's really the qualifiers. Measure what you did. And that's the same in the gym. How many times, too tired, I don't feel like it. But after you go there for an hour and you work out and you hang out, it's like, I feel so much better, and sometimes you'll never know how much better, just like that cheesecake, unless you accept opportunities that aren't always familiar, sometimes surprising. But to your story with the judge, it just took that one interaction to have you pivot and redirect something, get experience. And you could have done anything before meeting that person, and it would have never happened. And you always know what you did sometimes, but you never know what you could have done. Right? What that person who was in front of you and just passed by. Melissa, what's your thought? First show, what do you think?
First show, it was a really fun experience. I'm really grateful to have had Leslie here with me because she made me super comfortable. Very good moral support. Thank you. And thank you. I know there's a lot of people that came that are commenting, and I'm super grateful for everybody that came and really made this such an interactive experience. There's nothing, I think, worse than speaking and feeling like no one's listening. So really want to say thank you to everyone. I think two things that really resonated with me. One was just what you said, Don, be a star before you're already in the sky. Like, that's so important. I think mindset's so important. And it's not about being boastful or about being somebody who's very, in your face or brags all the time. I don't like that kind of personality, but it's just having that sort of self-confidence and believing in yourself, I think, is super important. And so I'm like making a mental sticky note of that. I really like that. And I think just like the last thing I would say is, I think the pandemic obviously changed us forever. I don't think we're ever going to go back to exactly the way things were, for better or for worse. But one really big takeaway from me is that I think it's helped to make us more empathetic, and it's helped us to see that what we see on the surface isn't always what's happening underneath. And somebody at work might seem like they're fine, but they're not. And you have to ask those questions. Yes. What are they going through? What are they dealing with? Maybe they have a sick parent at home. Maybe they have a sick child at home. Maybe they have a sick spouse at home. They might be dealing with a spouse who lost their job and they're having financial problems. You never know what somebody else is dealing with. It's like that duck, right? Like really calm on the water and they're very furiously paddling underneath. So like, if I could say one thing, it's just find out how fast your people are paddling. Like, what are they going through?
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful insight and great advice, because instead of distrusting before you know, why don't you trust a little more that there's things you will never know until time or someone gives it to you. So by giving somebody an extra allowance, right, and saying that, on the surface, here's this, but I'll throw you 30% more of that until we know. And because the last thing you want to do is say, oh God, if I would have known that, I would have never said that. If you were just making a joke or saying something and you just found someone experienced some tragic loss or something relating to that. And that's why your words are so important, because, I always have a tendency to let my emotion communicate in words, but are smart enough not to do anything with them for a while. But I just like this show, I like to know where I started with. Where was I in this situation? How did I feel? And the next day it'll get really softer. And then eventually I'll just say, I just need to tell them what they need to know. That's all I got to do. I don't got to give them the beginning, the after, how I feel. I mean, it's like the whole songbook. And at a certain point, it knocks you out, right?
Yes.
And then here's the thing, you can't unring a bell, so once you say something, once it's out there, it's out there. You could come back to it, but it's never the same, and I don't like to burn bridges. I like to build walls. I don't like confrontation if I can help it. I'm really, really good at it, but it takes so much out of you, and it's not something I don't like, but I can do. And it's knowing that some people respect you enough not to do certain things. So your safety and security is based on, I don't want to mess with that person. There's easier prey out there or something else, or you're just too nice a person for me. Even bad people have hearts at times, right? And says, I'm not going to hurt that person. They're too nice of a person, or, and I think that's important. If you treat everybody like it was your family,
Yes.
right? They can now maybe have access to being family. And I always I talk to Leslie about her pictures of her dad, on her wedding day, on Father's Day. And, to me, that's a star, the way her dad was looking at her, and that's all you need is enough stargazers who are already wanting to see you be a star, helping you be the star. And that's the people who have certified you and validated you, that you don't need a stranger or something to have to do that to keep your star shining. If we're going to use star, maybe that's a good word in the future. So anyways, I think we covered a lot of ground. Hopefully you saw who we really are, what we can be together, and then what we can be with the audience together. And why not build on the strongest shoulders you can and rely on it? If this is good for you, it's good for people like you. If you liked it, share it, comment on it. Don't be the best kept secret on LinkedIn. You don't want to be in the witness plan here. So with that, we could talk, but give us something to talk about next time. So thank you so much. Come back in 23 hours. Harvey Tuck is going to be here from England. He's a great guy, does a great show. I'll just tell you really quickly. So we got a little bit of advance here. Monday is actually Kelly, Natalie, and me. Tuesday is Leslie and Bev Glazer. Wednesday is Don and Rita. Thursday is Kelly, Deb, and Don, and it just gets better. So thank you again. See you again. Love you all. Have a safe weekend, and we'll talk again. Bye.